on, y'all? Welcome to Adventures with Kendall. Today we're visiting the gold rush mining town of Columbia, California to check out Columbia State Historic Park. It's gonna be a fun day walking down the streets that prospectors went down, and I can't wait to take you there. So let's get going and check out Columbia State Park. We're in the town of Columbia, California. This particular area is now called Columbia State Historical Park. This was once the second largest town within the state. Here in Columbia State Historic Park, we'll get the sense of what it's like to be a 49er during the time of the California Gold Rush through a town like this. You get a great vibe of that period while walking down the street. And the story of Columbia is quite fascinating. The story of Columbia started in March 1850 when Dr. Thaddeus Hildreth, his brother George, and a couple of other prospectors made camp. In just 2 days, they hit a bonanza, and the gulch yielded more than $4,500 in gold ore. News like that didn't take long to spread, and the area was soon flooded with thousands of miners hoping to find their fortunes. Within no time, a tent and shack city called Hildreth's Diggings was formed. The site was later called American Camp before it was changed permanently to Columbia. By 1852, Columbia had 8 hotels, 4 banks, 17 general stores, 2 firehouses, 2 bookstores, 1 newspaper, 3 churches, and 40 saloons and gambling halls. In 1854, a major fire destroyed 6 city blocks. The town was rebuilt, this time with fireproof buildings constructed of brick and iron. In 1857, another fire burnt down much of the town, but most of the newer brick buildings survived. In 1854, the Columbia and Stanislaus River Water Company was formed to build a new 60-mile aqueduct to supply water for the mines. The project was not completed until 1858. While the aqueduct was not a financial success for the company that built it, it did allow for more extensive mining that kept Columbia active into the 1860s. In 1859, Columbia was California's 3rd largest city. The mining operations of the 1860s began eating up some of the town itself. Miners dug under buildings and tore down houses to get at the gold underneath the city. The bricks from the destroyed buildings of Columbia were sold to the nearby town of Copperopolis for construction of buildings there. Columbia was one of the state's richest gold districts. An October 1858 edition of the Daily Alta California describes mines as rich in gold as any known placer mines in the world. According to that same newspaper, in 1854, a 27-pound gold nugget was discovered at a Columbia mine. Between 1850 and the early 1900s, $150 million in gold was recovered here. Columbia started declining in the 1860s, and by the 1870s, most of the miners had moved on to fresh ground. Remarkably, much of the town survived for decades until the 1940s, when the remaining buildings were stabilized and included in the newly formed Columbia State Historic Park. Now that we've learned the history of Columbia, California, let's go explore this town for a bit and see the general vibes it can bring to a visitor new to this Gold Rush era town. This includes seeing large buildings like the City Hotel, short buildings like the Garden Courtyard over here, and everything else in between, like this Barber's Pole. Yes, sir, a visit to Columbia brings in the vibes of a historic mining town during the time of the California Gold Rush. But this town keeps going. As we head down Washington Street, we'll pass the Matelock Gulch Gold Panning, where you can experience the panning for gold that the 49ers did within the area. Soon we'll see the Masonic Hall exhibit, the Columbia Gazette newspaper office, and the Fallon Hotel and Theater. They also have a nice ice cream parlor. Now that we have gotten a good sense of what the town is like in general, let's check out specific buildings and learn about their unique story. Let's start at this fun building, the Wells Fargo Express office and the stage office for the Quartz Mountain Stage Line. here's the interior of the Wells Fargo Express office. Its small size is a big contrast to the now larger banks that Wells Fargo uses. And here's the interior of the stage office for the Quartz Mountain stage line. Here in this stage station, people can buy tickets to get on stagecoaches or pick up what was delivered on the overland mail via the stagecoach. These stagecoach routes serve the many communities within the gold mining district of California. As seen on this map, with the southernmost town being Mariposa and the northernmost town being Sacramento. There is also this diagram of a stagecoach. This diagram shows the inner workings of a stagecoach that were used on the many stage lines throughout California. Other places within town include the exhibit for the native sons of the Golden West and Parrott's blacksmith shop. Inside this blacksmith shop, you'll see how metal items such as horseshoes were either manufactured or repaired for the citizens of Columbia. Nelson's Candy Kitchen, where you could buy a nice treat in a good old-fashioned candy store. There's Ebler's Leather and Saddle Emporium, where you can get great cowboy items such as hats and boots. And of course, there is the Jack Douglas Saloon, a fine place to have a deli meal or beer while in the environment of an Old West saloon. Another place to eat here in Columbia is the St. Charles Saloon. Serving beer and pizza, it is across the street from the Columbia Mercantile Store. The owner of the store is trying to run this like a Victorian general store, as you would have seen in the 1850s. They got everything in here, not just food and grocery stuff, but also fine farming material. Come on, let's buy this book. One final eatery here in town is the Columbia House Restaurant, where I got a fine burger meal. Doesn't that look delicious? Our last stop of our tour is the Old Knapp Store, which now houses the Columbia Museum. Here, visitors can learn more about the town's history through smaller artifacts, including several more in the back room. Whether it's artifacts from the native tribes or equipment used by the Columbia Fire Department. They even have information about how the brick buildings throughout town were built. They also preserve the filming history that was done here in Columbia. Over the years, big Hollywood studios would come to this town to shoot westerns in. These include Rage at Dawn from 1955 and High Noon from 1952. Speaking of High Noon, here's the original carriage from that movie. Boy, I had a fun time exploring the rich history of this Gold Rush era town. But now, let's head back to the studio. I hope you had a fun time exploring Columbia State Historic Park. It was a great time walking down the streets the 49ers walk down in a town like that. I also had fun exploring the shops. They were amazing, especially the candy shop. I really love that. And also the Wells Fargo office. That was amazing to see. Anyway, I hope you're ready for more adventures. Our next episode will be about Disney animator Ward Kimball and his Grizzly Flats Railroad collection. But until then, if you have a location for us to go on, comment or email down below. We would love to see your suggestions. And also subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We would love to see your faces. Now that's all the time we have here on Adventures with Kendall. See you later, folks, and may your gifts bless the world.